Today I'm going to be talking about dealing with grief during the holidays. My dad was killed in a construction accident when I was 10 years old. A guy was nailing in the door frame in the corner with a nail gun. The nail gun was proven faulty because it was over 40 years ago. But anyway, the nail went in the corner of his eye, and his immediate reaction was to pull it out. But anyway, I'm just going to talk about that because it was 2 weeks before Christmas, and I hope I can help someone that's going through grief this Christmas to realize that they're okay and the emotions that they're feeling are okay. A lot of people think Christmas is a happy time for most people. I was 10 years old 2 weeks before Christmas when I found out my dad had died in a construction accident. It's crazy how it's been 40 years, but some things are still clear to me this day as the day that it happened. I was in a public school, and I remember being called into the principal's office. And getting into the principal's office, I just knew something was wrong because my aunt and a couple of my cousins were there, and I had found out that my dad had been injured on the job. My dad was working a couple of hours away from where we lived, and it was like a decision like who was going to go to the hospital or if they were going to leave me there. I was 10 years old, so I got to go with my two older brothers with my aunt to the hospital and my mom. And I remember being there that night, and then my mom had to make a decision to whether or not they were going to unplug everything. She really didn't want to make the decision, and I felt like everything happened. He just died on his own. And I remember being in the hospital at 10 years old, and I remember the sudden set of just like doom or something that I felt. And I remember my oldest brother hyperventilating. And I remember that there was a nurse who prayed with our family. But it was also shocking. So we all went back to our town where we lived at. And I remember the phone just kept ringing and ringing, and people kept calling. At 10 years old, people are bringing food in. And I remember them hanging like a purple wreath or ribbon, some kind of ribbon on our door. My dad pastored a church, and they hung that wreath there. But one thing I do remember is walking by the Christmas tree. And I kept walking by it. When I would walk by it, I would glance under, and I would see the present that I had bought my dad. Me and my brothers finally decided to open our dad's presents, and we put them away. Some things of the funeral stand out to me very clear. I remember my Uncle Charles was in charge of me, and he pretty much took care of me that day. And I remember during their funeral, we walked out, and he wanted me to kiss my dad, and I didn't want to because I said he felt cold. But we made it through Christmas that year. And anyway, I will tell you some things about my childhood growing up. My dad drove a red and white Chevy pickup. And I remember being on the school bus driving home, and we would be on the school bus, and I'd see my dad's red and white pickup in the driveway, and I would say, "Oh, Dad's home," and be really excited. And then I remembered he's not there. If you're grieving, it's okay to feel angry and it's okay to feel sad during the Christmas season. Holidays are some of the hardest times for people who have lost loved ones to get through and to act like everything's okay when it's not, and when you're dying inside. One of the Christmases I remember, my mom was left at 35 years old with 4 kids. This was a long time ago, before, I don't know, a lot of people did anything, but I remember Mom had like 2 or 3 presents under the tree. That was it. And I remember one of the presents was for me and my brother, and we were sharing it. And anyway, this couple came by that we had known for a little while, knew my dad had passed away, and they brought this huge, big raggedy doll in for me. And I remember it meaning so much, because I knew I wasn't really going to get any toys that year. But you would be surprised if you would take the time out to go have coffee with someone who's lost a loved one, or just to take some kids some presents. You just never know what someone's going through. Since my dad was killed in a construction accident, for a long time I had trouble being around nail guns. My husband and I have built custom homes where we used to live, and the first time I remember being on the job site, it was kind of unnerving. But I have got to where, I can use a nail gun, I can nail stuff, and it gets better. But I will tell you, time does heal. It doesn't mean you don't still hurt, but time does heal. Anyway, some struggles I had growing up, as a teenager, is I would, or, from 10 on, I would be like, oh, I just wish I could have my dad hug me again, or I could just sit in his lap. That's one of the things that I definitely missed, but it's okay, to feel those emotions. A lot of times we think it's not okay, and we try to bottle stuff up when we need to realize it's okay, it's human to grieve. Grief is a part of life. And then, I remember my graduation day. I wish my dad was there. My wedding day was very hard. I do have a loving stepdad that I love very much, that walked me down the aisle. And, but still, you always, wish that your dad was there. People grieve different, and then there's no time limit with grief, and just because it gets easier with time does not mean that you love them any less. Some people like to go to the cemetery and put flowers and stuff on their graves, and then me personally, the cemetery is very hard for me. It brings up very raw emotions, no matter how long it's been. So give yourself time in this grieving process. Don't try to rush things. Just let your mind process what's happened and realize you're going to be okay. And one thing I would say is, don't let grief turn you into a bitter person. I was always told grief can make you bitter, or it can make you a better person. I feel like it's helped me be a better person, to have more compassion for people who have lost someone, because unless you've lost a dad like I have, you really wouldn't understand what I'm going through unless you have. So let grief make you better, not bitter. One thing I will say, one thing about my mom that stuck out in my head, I know she dealt with a lot with being 35 years old and left with four kids, but she said if it wasn't for us kids that she would have crawled in a hole and just died. So kids, be there for your parents if they've lost a mate. And then if you're a kid going through losing a parent, it will get easier with time.